When you think of Queen Victoria, you likely envision the stoic, unyielding matriarch immortalized on postage stamps, gold coins, and marble plaques scattered across 4 continents. You see the embodiment of Victorian dignity, a symbol of an empire that never saw the sun set. But if you were to step behind the heavy velvet curtains of history and stand directly before her, the sensory reality would shatter every royal illusion you've ever held. Imagine you are standing in a drafty corridor of Windsor or Balmoral. As the heavy doors open, the first thing that hits you isn't the opulence of the room, but a wave of thick, stagnant air. You would smell a stench so potent that the men who ran her global empire were forced to send massive floral arrangements ahead of their visits, just to make the air breathable. This is the smell of a woman who has not bathed consistently in decades, a body wrapped in unwashed black wool that has seen too many days of grief and sedentary neglect. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you look for the majestic queen, but you find a woman barely 5 feet tall, her body struggling under the weight of nearly 80 kilos. You notice her spine has curved into a pronounced hump, pulling her forward in a slow collapse toward the ground. Her left eye droops from the aftermath of a stroke, and her face, perhaps the most recognizable on Earth, slides slightly to one side. If she were to speak to you, you would see the true price of her legendary appetite. Her original teeth are long gone, victims of a lifetime of unlimited sugar and the brutal, anesthetic-free dentistry of her era. In their place, you would see heavy dentures carved from ivory, which she uses to clatter through 6-course dinners in mere minutes. Look down, and you would see legs so swollen with rheumatism and crushed by weight that she can no longer walk across the room. Hidden beneath her layers of mourning silk are the private agonies she refused to name: a prolapsed uterus and a painful hernia that she stubbornly declined to treat. You are looking at a woman who is nearly deaf and almost entirely blind, a body falling apart piece by piece, while the world outside cheers for her longevity. This is the horrifying truth of the Widow of Windsor, a woman whose physical decline was as vast as the empire she ruled. To understand how the Widow of Windsor became this decaying monument of grief, we must return to the beginning. Part 2: The Cage of Kensington and the Birth of a Will. To understand how the Queen became this decaying monument of grief, you must travel back to the very beginning, to a gray English morning in May 1819. Imagine yourself as a fly on the wall in Kensington Palace, watching a baby girl who is mathematically very close to the throne, but surrounded by a mountain of debt and the ghosts of dying royal uncles. You are witnessing the construction of a prison. This is the Kensington system, a psychological cage engineered by an ambitious former army captain, John Conroy. Designed to control a future queen, it turned childhood into captivity. Under his watch, young Victoria lived a life of relentless surveillance. She was never allowed to walk down the stairs alone, always with a hand gripping hers, a silent reminder that freedom was forbidden. She was kept in total isolation, barred from meeting other children, denied even the simplest friendships that define a childhood. And privacy? It did not exist. Every night, she slept in her mother's bedroom. Every lesson, every book, every moment of her day was recorded, monitored, and controlled. This was not protection. It was preparation for obedience. But within the silence of that gilded cage, something unexpected was taking shape, a will strong enough to defy an empire. But look closer at her dinner plate. While her cousins across England are feasting on pheasant and running free, you see Victoria sitting before a bowl of plain bread and milk. This isn't just a simple meal. It is a deliberate rationing of appetite. Conroy believes that a hungry, isolated child will be easier to manage once she wears the crown. He wants her dependent, compliant, and grateful. However, as you watch her grow, you see something Conroy and her mother failed to calculate. Behind her silence, Victoria is developing something harder than simple childhood stubbornness. She is learning the art of storage, hiding her true self and her growing will in a place so deep that no one can reach it. Now, imagine the clock striking 6 a.m. on June 20th, 1837. The old king is dead. You see the 18-year-old girl, finally queen, facing the people who spent nearly 2 decades trying to break her. Her first act of power isn't a grand speech or a signed decree. It is a simple demand for 1 hour of absolute solitude. No mother, no Conroy, no hand on the railing. As you watch the door close, you realize she is finally in her own skin, and she is about to start making up for every ounce of pleasure she was ever denied. Part 3. The stench of excess and the decay of the crown. As you step into the world of Victoria's early reign, the first thing you notice is a jarring lack of basic hygiene. You might be shocked to find that when she arrived at Buckingham Palace in 1837, there was not a single bathroom in the entire building. Architects had simply not considered it a priority. You would see the Queen bathing in a portable tin tub in her bedroom, filled by servants hauling water up the stairs, but only when she felt like it, which was far less frequent than those around her would have preferred. You must understand the environment you are breathing in. The London outside the palace walls is a slow river of 2 million people's waste moving through the Thames. By 1858, you would witness the Great Stink, a stench so unbearable that Parliament could not function, even with curtains soaked in lime chloride. Inside the palace, the situation is no better. You would be horrified to see raw sewage seeping through the kitchen floors just 2 feet below where the Queen's food is prepared. In this world of filth, you see Victoria's personal hygiene begin to fail. Because there was no language for a courtier to tell a queen she smelled, you notice the room fills with enormous, lavish floral arrangements, always positioned strategically between her and her guests. Her Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne, eventually manages to suggest she might benefit from bathing more and eating less, but you see her ignore him on both counts. The girl who was once restricted to bread and milk now commands the kitchens of 3 royal palaces, and she uses them without restraint. You watch her indulge in puddings of every kind, steaming or iced, chocolate or fruit, never choosing one when she can have them all. Even for a simple charity ball, she refuses to risk hunger. Servants follow with lavish provisions: rice soup, ham, tongue, lobster salad, cold chicken, and delicate patisserie. But what truly astonishes you is the speed. Course after course disappears before your eyes. 6 courses, consumed in just 30 minutes. At her table, there is only one rule: keep pace with the Queen, or go hungry. But look at her lips. In every portrait, you notice they are sealed tight. You realize this is a mask for the catastrophe in progress. Behind those closed lips, the sugar she consumes in extraordinary quantities is eating her alive. You would see teeth that are brown, loose, and rotting, the inevitable price of her unrestrained hunger. Eventually, you witness the grim transition to heavy ivory dentures, which she will wear until the day she dies. Yet, the true cost of indulgence would not be paid in flesh alone, but in blood. Part 4. The Shadow of the Womb and the Curse of the Blood. Your journey now leads you into the most intimate and painful years of Victoria's life, her marriage and the brutal physical toll of motherhood. You see her fall instantly in love with her first cousin, Albert. He is the only person who truly sees the full scope of her. The explosive temper, the loud, startling laugh, and even the scent of a body she refuses to wash. But as you watch their life together, you witness a dark cycle of biological duty. Over 17 years, you see Victoria endure 9 pregnancies, a process she describes in her own handwriting as being a breeding animal. You might be shocked to hear her call her own newborn babies ugly, or label her daughters cows for choosing to breastfeed. For her, pregnancy is not a royal joy. It is a physical brutality of nausea, swollen ankles, and deep postpartum depression. To survive the final births, you see her demand chloroform, defying the Church's decree that a woman must suffer in pain as part of God's design. However, the true horror reveals itself not in childbirth, but in the blood. You watch as Victoria comes to a devastating realization. She has passed a terrifying mutation to her children: hemophilia, the royal disease that would haunt generations. Her beloved son, Leopold, suffers the most. A single knock is enough to make him bleed. His joints swell with invisible hemorrhages, his body betraying him from within. And with every letter she writes to desperate physicians, you feel the weight of a mother's guilt. She begs for a cure that does not exist, knowing the suffering began with her. Then, the inevitable tragedy arrives. At just 30 years old, Leopold dies from a brain hemorrhage after a simple fall. Victoria, the most powerful woman in the world, is left to endure the cruelest fate of all, outliving her own child. In that moment, the empire stands tall, but a mother's heart lies shattered in silence. But the curse doesn't end there. You see her daughters carry this silent bleeding into the marriages of other royal houses, effectively destabilizing the thrones of Europe. As you observe the Queen during this time, you see her continue to eat as a way to cope with the stress, her teeth rotting further, unaware that the chromosomes she and Albert shared have permanently altered the course of history. The empire holds its breath, while its queen's family begins to bleed quietly from the inside. Part 5. The Widow of Windsor and the Collapse into Darkness. The year 1861 marks the moment you witness Victoria's spirit fail permanently. After typhoid fever takes Albert in just 2 weeks, you see the Queen stand at his deathbed and watch her internal structure shatter. From this day on, for the next 40 years, you will never see her in anything but black wool and silk. As you follow her into this long twilight, you begin to witness the slow decay of her world and of herself. Each night, grief becomes ritual. She places a plaster cast of Albert's hand beside her in bed, as if death itself could be softened by memory. Gradually, she abandons the habits of self-care. Bathing becomes rare, reduced to the brief touch of a damp cloth when absolutely necessary. At Balmoral, the air grows heavy with stillness, thick with the scent of drawn curtains, loyal dogs, and the faint staleness of garments worn for far too long. Beneath layers of mourning black, time leaves its mark. Her body changes. Weight settles upon her small frame, and her skin, hidden from the light, bears the quiet toll of neglect. This is no longer merely sorrow. It is a life suspended in grief, a queen fading into shadow, one memory at a time. You notice she retreats from the world, refusing public appearances and state occasions to the point where radicals begin to question the monarchy's worth. But in this isolation, you see one man who remains, John Brown. You listen as this blunt Scottish servant calls her woman to her face and tells her when she has had enough whiskey. He is the only person left who treats her like a human being, and you see her cling to him as the world whispers of scandal. Then, in 1883, you witness a pivotal accident. Victoria falls down a staircase at Windsor. From this point on, you see a hump begin to form on her upper spine, a result of arthritic kyphosis that pulls her head toward her chest in a slow collapse toward the earth. You watch her ankles swell until her shoes no longer fit, her 45-inch waist making every movement a struggle. In her final years, you are looking at a queen who is nearly a ghost of her former self. You see her through the haze of cataracts, her hearing so far gone that privacy is impossible because everyone must shout to be heard. Yet you see her continue to eat through her ivory dentures with the same frantic pace until the very day her appetite, the last thing standing, finally fails. As she lies in her white coffin on a muffled gun carriage, you see the final secrets she takes to her grave. Hidden in her left hand, positioned carefully under a bunch of flowers, is a photograph of John Brown and a lock of his hair. You realize that the woman who ruled the world's largest empire has finally found the one thing her body and her crown could never provide: peace from the weight of her own history. And so, as the century drew to a close, the longest reign of the modern age approached its final breath. Part 6. The Final Breath and the Secrets in the Shroud. The year 1900 arrived like a heavy shroud, one that Queen Victoria herself described in her journal as horrible. You watch as she is forced to outlive yet another child, her son Alfred, and then a grandson, until the woman who had written in her diary every single day since age 13 finally lets the pages go blank. Her last entry, a fragile mention of managing a little milk with difficulty, signals to you that the end is near. In mid-January 1901, you see her sliding between decades, her mind flickering like a dying candle. Then a paralytic stroke takes the left side of her face. You witness the most recognizable face in the world slide into a sagged cheek and a drooping eye. As her family, the Kaiser of Germany and her son Bertie, gather at her bedside, you notice she surfaces from the haze for only one thing: her cream-colored Pomeranian, Turi. You see her hold the dog for an hour, a final moment of simple, wordless comfort. At 6:30 in the evening, on January 22nd, the empire holds its breath, as Queen Victoria draws her last. Yet even in death, she remains in control. Through private instructions left to her doctor, carried out far from the prying eyes of her family, she shapes the final image the world will never see. Inside the white coffin, you witness a startling bridge between her two lives. The public widow. She is laid to rest with Prince Albert's dressing gown and a plaster cast of his hand placed tenderly beside her. The secret woman. Hidden beneath a delicate bouquet. In her left hand lies a photograph of John Brown and a lock of his hair. The final rebellion. On her finger rests the wedding ring of John Brown's mother, worn in silence, never removed for 18 years. In death, as in life, she belongs to two worlds, one bound by duty, the other by love. And as the empire mourns its queen, history whispers the truth, that beneath the crown lay a heart fiercely and irrevocably her own. As the muffled wheels of the gun carriage carry her away, you look at the woman who was once a 5-foot-tall icon of dignity. The 45-inch waist, the ivory dentures, and the curved spine are finally still. You realize that as the warships of the Empire salute her, the smell, the decay, and the crushing weight of the crown no longer belong to the living, only to history. Subscribe to Dirty Royal Secrets for more dark royal scandals, forbidden histories, and the secrets that shaped empires.